What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to take a look at what a standard sort of CW QSO looks like. You know, we're not talking like a formulaic parks in the air, summits on the air, SKCC, that kind of thing, but just sort of a general exchange of information. Now, these normally go according to sort of, it's not really a script, but there's sort of a protocol you follow as to what information you send and roughly what order you send that information in. But I was getting ready to shoot this video last night, and I had set my radio up and I had called QRL on frequency. My plan was to call CQ and see if I could get somebody to answer me back so I could show you what one of these conversations sounded like. And I called QRL a couple times to see if the frequency was clear. And before I knew it, I had stopped sending and I heard QRZ question mark on my frequency, which is asking, who's on frequency. So I responded with my call sign, and that's where the video is going to start. You're going to see me send my call sign, and then a station is going to respond to me, and he was just looking for a signal report. He wanted to see what his station sounded like, and so we got into a conversation about what his report was and a little bit about him. So you'll see that he talks a little bit about he'd been away from the key for a while. And so you'll see kind of how that conversation goes. And it doesn't go according to what you would normally expect a regular standard exchange of information to do, but they don't always go that way. This was a little more free form, maybe a little more disjointed because we weren't planning on, or at least I wasn't planning on having this happen. But I thought it was a good segue into the video because it does give you sort of an idea as to what some of these QSOs look like. So we'll take a look at that contact, and then we'll go over the Long Island CW Club QSO protocol, which will give you sort of an idea as to what to expect if you get into one of these conversations, roughly what information you're going to exchange, roughly what order it's going to be in. We'll talk about some of the things you want to consider, and then it'll end with another QSO with someone on 40 meters, and that one goes a little more according to what you would expect one of these conversations to look like. But I wanted to give you a little bit of heads up or a little bit of lead into the beginning of that QSO, because without this, you wouldn't have any context. It would just be me sending a call sign and then some random conversation happening. Like I said, I didn't plan on starting the video this way. I planned on calling CQ, having someone answer me and have a conversation with them and then get into the video. But it just so happened that as soon as I started calling QRL, somebody responded. So I figured, well, I'll start the camera, we'll start rolling, and we'll see what happens. So what you're about to see is that conversation last night. Then we'll hop over to the computer, we'll take a look at that QSO protocol, we'll talk about what kind of things you want to consider when you get into a CW conversation, and then we'll finish it off with a little more common CW QSO. So stick around, and I'll be back in just a second. He wanted to know how my station was coming in. He said, just thank you for coming back. Coming back to me. Old man. Name here is Jerry. Having problems with my key. It's okay now. Please excuse my fist. You're fine, man. Very. Very rusty. Haven't been on CW for many years. You're doing good, man. Thanks. Evan. Fine business. On all my RST 599. So perfect. So is he. Nice. Signal. Gonna give his fist a rest. 73. All right, so that was a little bit interesting. I was not expecting him to come back. I called QRL and he immediately came back and wanted to know how he sounded. I'm actually here to shoot a video about like rag chews, and that was crazy because one just miraculously happened right on top of me. That was completely unplanned and unscripted. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it. So I wanted to shoot a video kind of talking a little bit about what to expect if you call CQ, what's in short, or you answer somebody's CQ, what's sort of a general conversation going to look like. Now that one didn't go the way most of them do, but I want you to understand that most of the time, most of these conversations kind of go the same basic way. Like I said, that one was a little disjointed and more free-form rag chewy. It didn't really follow the structure most QSOs do, but again, it wasn't really intended to. He just came back to me because he heard me calling QRL on frequency and wanted to know how he sounded. His name was Jerry. He said he'd been off the air for a long time and hadn't been on CW in a long time and wanted to see how his fist sounded. And he apologized for his fist. Jerry, your fist sounded great. You sounded fantastic. So no complaints there. So like I said, I kind of just wanted to shoot this video and talk a little bit about what to expect, either if you hop on the air and call CQ or if you answer somebody's CQ. Now remember, if you're calling CQ, you control the pace of the QSO, right? So what we're going to do here in a second is we're going to hop over to my computer and we're going to take a look at the Long Island CW Club's QSO protocol, and we'll talk a little bit about what to expect in sort of a general QSO. And I'm not talking like Parks on the Air, Summits in the Air, SKCC, but sort of a general exchange of information. So like I said, we're going to hop over here to the computer in a second, and we're going to take a look at that document, and then maybe if I've got some time, I'll hop back over here to the radio, call CQ a couple times, and see if we can get another answer. So with that, stick around. We'll be back in just a second, and we'll take a look at that QSO protocol. I'll be right back. All right, everybody. So we're back. So what you're looking at is the Long Island CW QSO protocol. This was created by W6 Jim. Now this is an older version of the document. The newer version can actually be found on the website. So if you go to longislandcwclub.org, up on top you will see academic downloads. And if you click that, you will see that there is the LI QSO protocol. If you click the little plus, you can download it. And then there's also a quick sheet. And the quick sheet allows you to fill in your information. So I'll show you what it looks like. So this is the quick sheet, and you can kind of, it shows you if you're calling CQ, what you're going to respond to and say, and if the hunter's answering your CQ, what they're going to say. So same basic document. It's very similar to what I have up here on the screen, but this is an older version. This has been around for a while, and I kind of like the layout of this one. So on the left side of the screen is sort of your standard, more formal QSO. Over on the right side is more your quick format. I normally start out in the standard, more formal format. And then depending on how the QSO goes, I may switch over to the more quick version of the QSO. It kind of depends. It depends on the cadence of the QSO, how things are going, how the other operator is responding. If the other operator is responding with pro signs and all the correct grammatical things, then I'll generally stay with the more standard format. If they switch over to BK and things like that, I'll generally switch over to quick. But a standard QSO is kind of broken into 4 parts. All right. And you may not hear all 4 parts, though. You may only hear part 1 and part 4. You might hear part 1, part 2, and part 4. It kind of depends on how the QSO goes. It could go beyond past part 3 here. So part 1 is the intro. So this is your minimum. This is your minimum information. So you're going to say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for the call. You're going to give the RST. Generally, I send it twice. The first time I send it with full numbers, and the second time I send it with cut numbers. You'll send your location, and normally this will be your complete location, including city. So I would send Endicott, New York. You can see in this instance on the screen, this person is in Dallas, Texas, and you can see that his name is Jim. Sometimes I'll send the full word name. You heard that in the QSO earlier. Or I will send OP, short for operator. I normally send the RST twice. I normally send my QTH twice, and I normally send my name twice. And then you ask, okay, how ? How did you copy? And then the pro sign AR. That allows the other operator to know that, okay, I'm turning the QSO back over to you. It is your turn to respond now. And then you would send their call, DE, or from your call, and then K to signify you're ending your sending. On the short side, you're still giving the pleasantries, good morning, good afternoon, and thanks. You can see we're removing the RST letters. So over here, we're actually sending your RST. Over here, we're just sending UR and then their RST. You can see we shortened it up a little bit. So it's a little more quick, a little more abbreviated. Part 2, this is additional info. This is sort of your standard info. This is most of these CW conversations are at least going to go into this second portion. They don't have to. I mean, it's a valid QSO after this first session. As long as you exchange call signs and at least one piece of information, it's a valid contact, right? So in part 2 here, when it gets turned back, we're going to say, okay, thanks. And you normally respond with their name. So the guy I just worked a little while ago, that was Jerry. So, I would say, thanks, Jerry. Thanks for the info or the report. And then normally you'll tell them what rig you're using, so what radio you're using. So you'd send rig. So in this case, I'm on a Yaesu FTDX10, so I would send rig Yaesu FTDX10. Normally you'll tell them what kind of antenna you're on. So I'm on an end-fed random wire, and it's about 25 feet in the air. Normally you'll give the weather as well. And this can be, real simple. It could just be cloud, or it could be sun. Or you could say, it's raining cats and dogs here. It depends on how wordy you want to get. And normally you'll send the temperature. Now, if I am working a continental unit, if I'm working a US station, I'll send Fahrenheit. If I'm working a DX station that's not a US station, so in other words, it's not, Alaska or Hawaii or Puerto Rico or someplace else, but a DX entity that's not the United States. So, Canada, Mexico, Europe, Asia, wherever, I will send my temperature in Celsius. And then again, I'm going to say, okay, how did you copy? AR, and then back to them. And if we're using the abbreviated version, I'll just say how ? How copy, and then BK. Right. So if you're shortening things up, you can see it's a little more abbreviated on the other side. Most QSOs are going to go through at least that information. Quite often they'll go through this third part here. So when it comes back, normally you'll say, okay, I've got, I received your information, and you can say any number of different things here. This says solid copy, but you could say, thanks for the report, thanks for the information, whatever. Normally in this part, you'll tell the person how long you've been a ham, what your age is, right? So in this case, I would send, I've been a ham for 2.5 years. My age, I'm 50 years old, and I'm a teacher. So I would send, been a ham for 2.5 years, age 50 years. And then I would normally send job teacher is normally what I would send. And then again, okay, how copy, AR, and then their call sign, DE, your call sign. And then normally this is where the QSO would end. You'd say, okay, thanks for the QSO. Normally I just say, thanks for the QSO, and I hope to see you again, or, hope to hear you again, something like that. And then I'll send 73. Sometimes I'll send best 73. It kind of depends on how I feel. And then again, AR, their call sign, DE, your call sign, thank you. And then you're going to send the pro sign SK. And I normally end it with 2 dits. SK signifies this is the end of this QSO. So we're going silent key, 2 dits, QSO's over. All right. So that's, if you are new to this and you hear someone calling CQ, and it's not CQ POTA or CQ SOTA or CQ SKCC or something like that, this is kind of the normal format. Now, sometimes people will change up the order they do things in. They might send these things in slightly different order. But this is a basic QSO. This is what you're going to see most of the time. So if you're new to this and you hear somebody calling CQ and you want to respond, don't panic. Most of the time they don't turn into free form flowing conversations. Conversational CW is a skill that not a lot of people on the air use. You'll hear it sometimes. If you, especially down towards the bottom of the band, you'll hear a lot of conversations going on. But most of the stuff you're going to hear sort of adheres to this general thing. Now, a lot of times, if you really get into a conversation, once you get through this part 3, it may go into, okay, hey, I just built this really cool antenna, or whatever. You might, if it's somebody you might talk about some other topic that you're both, you're both into, cars or whatever, right? It can be anything. You can have a conversation about anything on CW, just like you can in any other form of communication. I will say that normally for me, when I get into more free form conversational stuff, I use normal whole language. I don't use a lot of abbreviations anymore. I'll send GUD instead of good sometimes, or, things like that. But I generally use whole words, whole language. Now, keep in mind that when you get into a conversation like that, it's all head sending. And, with something like this, you could have this script open in front of you and kind of just follow the script. This is in Word, so you could, or, I've got it in Google Docs too. You could just, you could put your own information in there and kind of follow it along. Once it goes off of the script, so to speak, now it's 100% head sending. And I'm going to do a video on head sending and why I think it's an important skill to learn and kind of how I would go about approaching it. It's a skill that not a lot of people have, or they do, but it's only very limited. Their head sending vocabulary is very limited. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, in another video, about how I went about becoming more proficient at head sending. And I still trip over myself sometimes. Everybody does, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. But I just kind of wanted you to see that. And there is additional info down here. So various things about a QSO. There are different points here. There are 12 different points that Jim's got on this document. Everything from calling QRL question mark to ask if the frequency is in use, to how to call CQ, how to answer a CQ, endings, all sorts of things. One thing to note, if you're worried about being able to copy some of this information, remember, most of this stuff is just filler. If the other station doesn't know if you're copying it or not. Really, the only things you really need to worry about, you want to get their name, right? So I can respond, with, hey, Bill or Jim or Ed or whatever their name is. And I generally like to make sure I copy their QTH, although you can look them up on QRZ, or in my case, I'm using Log for Old Men. So when I worked that last station, I punched his call in here and it gave me his name and I could see where he was on the map. But I generally like to at least get that info, right? But they don't know if you're copying everything else. So don't be super scared that the other station is going to think you're not copying, because even if you don't copy everything, they don't know. The other thing to keep in mind is if you call CQ, you control the conversation. Now, I know it's scary to just start calling CQ and see who answers you, but if you're not comfortable with all of this information and you just want to do a real quick, good afternoon, you're 599 in Dallas, Texas. My name is Jim, and when you're done, just go straight to 73 and thanks. You can do that. It's your QSO. You're running the frequency. You determine when the QSO is over. When you answer someone else's CQ, you're kind of at their mercy, right? I mean, it's their frequency. They're going to talk about as much as they want to talk about. Now, you can always say, you know, thanks for the contact. I appreciate it. Have a good one, 73. Or you can, you know, if you really need to get out of a conversation and you're worried that, you know, you don't know what's going on, you can just, when it comes back to you, you can just say SRI, QSB, TNX, and 73, right? Sorry, there's QSB. You're fading. Thank you for the contact. And 73, send 2 dits. And they don't know whether there's actually QSB or whether you just aren't copying them, right? So like I said, don't panic. When you get on the air, especially if you're a newer CW operator, don't panic about this stuff. It doesn't have to be scary. You know, you can follow a script like this. Once you get used to this information, you won't need this. I haven't used a document like this in a long, long time. But I show this to my students, you know, because at least it gives you some framework to work from. So like I said, I'm going to hop back over to the radio. In fact, it's actually going to be the next day because it is currently almost 11 o'clock at night here. So I'm going to, and nobody's going to answer a CQ at 11 o'clock at night probably. I could probably get on 40 meters and maybe work somebody out west, but it's kind of late. So I think what I'll do is I'll pick this back up tomorrow. I'll hop on the bands. I'll call CQ. I'll see if I can get somebody to answer me, and I'll try to see if I can get somebody to go through a more standard QSO than what you heard at the beginning of the video. Like I said, that QSO at the beginning of the video just happened to go the way it did in kind of a funny way. So, like I said, I'll hop back on the radio and we'll see if we can make a few contacts, at least one, and we'll go through. I don't know if I'll go through the entire thing or not. It depends on the other operator. I'll slow down. Like I said before, I find that generally I get more bytes in the 16 to 18 word range than I do in the mid 20s. So I'll probably slow my key speed down to about 18 words a minute and see who comes back to me. So next time you see me, we'll be at the radio, and it'll actually be tomorrow, and we'll see if we can make some more contacts. So I will be back in a little bit. Okay, so it's the next morning. I've been calling CQ for probably half an hour, 45 minutes with no takers. So I think I've got a sched now. I think I've got somebody who's going to respond to me. So I'm going to do this just like I would even if I wasn't expecting somebody to answer me. So I'm going to call QRL. I'm going to check to make sure the frequency is not in use. Now, I've been on this frequency for a while, so I should be good. Okay. Here we go. All right. Man. Chesterfield, Virginia. Name is Santee. So he's on a 991. So he's 450 watts. Mild. So that was a QSO. So, as you can see, we both made quite a few mistakes, which is totally normal. If you listen to a QSO on the air, most of the time you're going to hear a lot of mistakes. That is totally normal. You heard me make some. You heard Santiago make some. When you're doing this, expect to mess things up. It's just kind of the way it goes. Nobody's perfect. Nobody copies every single thing they're sent. Nobody sends perfect all the time, right? So when you do this, that kind of followed sort of the standard formula one would expect. We only went through weather. I didn't go into how long I'd been a ham or, you know, what I did for a living or anything like that. But that's a pretty standard QSO, right? That's kind of what you would expect to hear if you do one of these. So I just wanted to kind of give you a feel for what it actually sounds like to do one. I'll do some videos, like I said, on things like head sending, because that's one of the hardest parts of this, is trying to settle that information from your head. And like I said before, your key speed is going to be important too. You're going to get a lot more takers, I think, at lower key speed. Although, like I said this morning, I called and nobody answered me. I think that's because it's the SKCC weekend sprints, and most of the people that would answer me, especially at these speeds, are doing that. But all in all, yeah, so that's kind of what a standard QSO would look like. I really appreciate everybody watching. I hope that this helped you kind of get a feel for what sort of a standard QSO is going to sound like, and hopefully it encourages you to get on the air and give this a shot. Like I said, if you are calling CQ, you are going to control the conversation. You control the speed, you control the cadence, you control when it ends, right? You control what information is given. So even though it's kind of scary to hop on the radio and call CQ, it, generally speaking, is more advantageous for you because you control what to send, right? If you answer somebody else's CQ, they might go on for a while through the full QSO protocol and things like that. If you're calling CQ, if you only want to do the basic info, you can do the basic info and send 73. So at any rate, everybody, I really do appreciate you watching. Like I said, if you've got any questions, go ahead and feel free to leave them down in the comments below. And like I said, I will shoot some more videos on things like head sending and a little more conversational CW and things like that. So with that being said, thank you everybody for watching. And until next time, as always, 7-3, everybody.